The dust swirled across the parched Oklahoma landscape as Zara Elliot clutched her stomach, the gnawing emptiness a constant companion since she'd buried her husband 3 days prior. The year was 1879, and the promise of a new life had withered alongside John's fever-ravaged body, leaving her alone on the westward trail with nothing but a threadbare dress and the wedding band that now hung loose on her thin finger. She had been sitting by the side of the trail for hours, watching occasional wagons and riders pass without so much as a glance her way. Her black morning dress was coated with the same red dust that seemed to cover everything in this territory. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and Zara's parched lips had cracked from dehydration. She'd finished the last of her water that morning, and the small bundle of possessions at her feet contained nothing edible. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered in her consciousness until they slowed and stopped altogether. A shadow fell across her face, offering momentary relief from the sun's assault. "Madam, you all right down there?" The voice was deep but gentle, tinged with a slight southern drawl. Zara raised her head slowly, shielding her eyes with one trembling hand. Atop a chestnut stallion sat a man who seemed to materialize from her desperate prayers. He wore a weather-beaten hat, a faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered vest. A bandana hung loosely around his neck, and his face bore several days' worth of stubble. Her voice cracked from disuse and thirst. "I'm just resting." The cowboy's eyes, a striking hazel that somehow managed to appear both kind and wary, took in her morning dress, the small bundle beside her, and the wedding ring. Understanding dawned on his sun-weathered face. "When's the last time you had something to eat or drink, madam?" he asked, dismounting with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent more time in a saddle than on solid ground. "Yesterday. Maybe the day before," Zara admitted, her pride long abandoned to necessity. The man nodded and reached into his saddlebag. He pulled out a canteen and a cloth-wrapped package, then crouched beside her. "Name's Nathan Blackwell," he said, offering the canteen. "Most folks call me Nate." "Zara Elliot," she replied, accepting the water with shaking hands. She took a small sip, knowing better than to gulp despite her desperate thirst. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Just Nate, madam." He unwrapped the cloth to reveal a hunk of bread and some dried beef. "It's not much, but it'll keep you going." Zara hesitated only a moment before taking the offered food. Her first bite of bread was small, measured, but the second was larger as her body reminded her just how hungry she was. "Your husband?" Nate asked softly, nodding toward her black dress. 3 days ago, fever took him." The words were easier to say than she expected, perhaps because she'd repeated them so often in her mind. "We were heading to Willow Creek. My cousin has a boarding house there." Nate's expression remained neutral, but something flashed in his eyes. "Willow Creek's still a good 70 miles west," he said. "Not the kind of journey a woman should make alone on foot." Zara swallowed the last of the bread. "I don't have many options, Mr. Blackwell." He looked down the trail, then back at her. "I'm heading that way myself." "Got business in town?" He paused, seeming to weigh something in his mind. "My camp's just over that ridge. You're welcome to rest there tonight, get your strength back. Tomorrow, if you're willing, you can ride with me to Willow Creek." Under different circumstances, Zara might have been suspicious of such an offer from a stranger. But death had a way of rearranging priorities, and survival now took precedence over propriety. "I would be grateful," she said simply. Nathan extended his hand, helping her to her feet. The sudden movement made her head swim, and she stumbled. His strong arm caught her around the waist, steadying her against him. For a moment, they stood close enough that she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, so different from the erratic pulse that had marked John's final days. "Easy now," Nathan murmured, his breath warm against her hair. He released her carefully, making sure she was steady before picking up her small bundle. "Can you walk a bit, or should I get you up on thunder here?" "I can walk," Zara insisted, though her legs felt like cottonwood fluff. Pride was perhaps the only possession she had left. Nathan nodded, not arguing but stayed close as they began walking toward his camp. Thunder followed obediently, reins dragging in the dust. "How long have you been on the trail?" he asked after they'd walked in silence for several minutes. 6 weeks from Missouri, Zara replied. John, my husband, he had plans to open a carpentry shop in Willow Creek, said the new settlements needed good craftsmen. She paused, the memory catching in her throat. He was good with his hands. Nathan nodded. Good carpenters are worth their weight in gold out here. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Elliot. Zara, she corrected him. Seems only fair if I'm to call you Nate. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Fair enough. The camp was simple but well organized. A small tent was pitched beneath the shelter of a rocky outcropping, and a fire ring contained the ashes of previous meals. Nate helped her sit on a bedroll spread near the fire ring, then busied himself gathering wood and kindling. Been on the trail long yourself? Zara asked, watching as he efficiently built a small fire. Coming up on 2 weeks this time, he replied. I run cattle between the territories, taking a break from that to handle some other business. You have family in Willow Creek, she asked, something closed in his expression. No family to speak of, just business. Zara didn't press. Everyone in the West had stories they preferred not to tell. She certainly had her own. As the sun began to set, Nathan prepared a simple meal of beans and salt pork, with coffee so strong it made Zara's eyes water. The food was plain but hot, and it was the first proper meal she'd had since before John's death. They ate in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one above them. I'll sleep outside, Nathan said as they finished their coffee. Tent's yours for the night. Zara wanted to protest that she couldn't take his shelter, but exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. Thank you, she said instead. For everything, he nodded, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Get some rest. We've got a long ride ahead tomorrow. Inside the tent, Zara wrapped herself in the blanket Nathan had provided. It smelled of horses, leather, and something distinctly male that reminded her painfully of John. For the first time since burying her husband, she allowed herself to weep silently, with her face pressed into the rough wool to muffle the sound. Outside, she could hear Nathan moving around the camp, the occasional soft word to his horse, and finally the settling sounds of a man preparing to sleep under the stars. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Each time she woke, she could see Nathan's silhouette against the night sky, sitting upright with his rifle across his knees, keeping watch. It had been so long since anyone had watched over her that the simple act brought fresh tears to her eyes. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and the quiet sounds of Nathan preparing breakfast. Zara emerged from the tent feeling more rested than she had in weeks, though still weak from her ordeal. Morning, Nathan greeted her, offering a tin cup of steaming coffee. Thought we'd have something to eat before heading out. I appreciate that, Zara said, accepting the coffee gratefully. And thank you for the tent. I hope you weren't too uncomfortable. Nathan shrugged. Been sleeping under the stars most of my life. One more night doesn't make much difference. After a breakfast of cornbread and more salt pork, Nathan packed up the camp with practiced efficiency. He helped Zara onto Thunder's back, then mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist to keep her steady. It'll be a long day's ride, he warned. Let me know if you need to stop. Zara nodded, acutely aware of the solid warmth of his chest against her back. It had been years since she'd ridden double, not since she was a girl riding with her father. The intimacy of their position wasn't lost on her, but necessity overshadowed propriety. They rode in companionable silence for the first few hours, the rhythm of Thunder's gait lulling Zara into a state of peaceful half-awareness. The landscape changed gradually, the flat plains giving way to gently rolling hills dotted with scrub oak and juniper. How did you come to be a cattle driver? Zara asked eventually, partly out of curiosity and partly to distract herself from the growing discomfort of the saddle. Nathan was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Wasn't much else for a boy with no family after the war, he finally said. Started as a wrangler when I was 14, worked my way up. Been driving herds north for almost 15 years now. That's a hard life, Zara observed. It's a life, he replied simply. What about you? How'd you end up heading west with a carpenter? Zara smiled faintly at the memory. John came to board at my father's house in Springfield. I was helping my mother run the place after my father took ill. John was quiet, hardworking. Ate everything put in front of him and fixed anything that broke without being asked. After 2 months, he asked for my hand, said he couldn't offer much but promised I'd never regret saying yes. Her voice caught. He kept that promise. Nathan's arm tightened briefly around her waist, a gesture of comfort that required no words. We need to keep an eye out, he said after a while, his tone shifting to something more alert. This stretch of trail has seen some trouble lately. What kind of trouble? Zara asked, suddenly aware of how exposed they were on the open trail. Road agents, mostly, looking for easy targets. His voice was calm, but she felt the tension in his body. Nothing for you to worry about. Thunder can outrun most trouble, and what he can't outrun, I can handle. There was something in his voice that made her believe him. A quiet confidence that spoke of a man who had faced danger and emerged victorious more than once. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horse and eat a cold lunch by a small creek. Nathan insisted Zara drink plenty of water and rest in the shade while he checked Thunder's shoes and tack. We should reach the McPherson ranch by nightfall, he told her as they prepared to resume their journey. Old friends of mine, they'll put us up for the night, give you a proper bed. You've been more than kind already, Zara said, feeling a flush of embarrassment at being such a burden. I don't want to impose on your friends as well. Nathan's expression softened slightly. Martha McPherson would never forgive me if I didn't bring you by. Besides, Thunder could use a real rest before the final push to Willow Creek tomorrow. Back on the trail, Zara found herself relaxing against Nathan's solid presence. There was something comforting about his steady breathing, the occasional quiet comments about the landscape or wildlife, and the way he would unconsciously adjust his hold on her when the terrain grew rougher. Late afternoon brought clouds and a cooler breeze. Nathan draped his coat around her shoulders without comment when he felt her shiver. The garment was heavy with his scent leather, tobacco, and horse, but undeniably comforting. Tell me about your cousin in Willow Creek, he said as they crested a hill that offered a view of the valley beyond. Rebecca, Zara replied, grateful for the distraction from her increasingly sore muscles. She's my father's niece. Went west with her husband 10 years ago. He struck it lucky in the mines, used the money to build a boarding house before the consumption took him. She's been running it alone for 3 years now. Sounds like a strong woman. She is. Wrote that she could use help with the cooking and cleaning, said there'd be a place for us. Zara swallowed hard. For me now, I suppose. A woman who can cook and keep house will never want for work in these parts, Nathan observed. Especially one with experience running a boarding house. The conversation died away as they entered a more wooded area. Nathan grew alert, his posture changing subtly. One hand left her waist to rest near the revolver at his hip. Something wrong, Zara whispered, feeling his tension. Probably nothing, he murmured back, but this is a good spot for an ambush. Stay quiet and let me do the talking if we run into anyone. They proceeded at a slower pace, Thunder's hooves muffled on the pine needle-covered path. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional cry of a jay or the distant chatter of a squirrel. Zara found herself holding her breath, straining to hear whatever had put Nathan on edge. The shot came without warning, the crack of a rifle echoing through the trees. Thunder reared, nearly unseating them both. Nathan's arm locked around Zara as he controlled the frightened horse with his other hand, turning him sharply off the trail and into the denser woods. Hold tight, he ordered, spurring Thunder into a gallop through the trees. Branches whipped past them as Nathan guided the horse with remarkable skill through the obstacle course of trunks and undergrowth. More shots rang out behind them, but they were already putting distance between themselves and the unseen assailants. Zara clung to the saddle horn, her heart pounding in her chest as Thunder's powerful stride ate up the ground beneath them. After what seemed like an eternity of crashing through the woods, Nathan finally slowed Thunder to a walk. The horse's sides were heaving, foam flecking his neck. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his voice tense with concern. "Yes," Zara managed, though her whole body was trembling with fear and adrenaline. "What happened? Who was shooting at us?" "Road agents, like I mentioned." Nathan's voice was grim. "They've been getting bolder lately. Usually they just want your valuables, but some have been known to leave no witnesses." "But we don't have anything worth taking," Zara protested. "A good horse like Thunder is worth plenty," Nathan replied, "and some men don't need much reason to do harm." They continued through the woods for another hour, Nathan clearly taking a roundabout route to avoid any pursuit. When they finally emerged from the trees onto a ridge overlooking a small valley, Zara gasped at the sight below. A neat farmhouse stood in a clearing, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Smoke rose from the chimney, and lights glowed warmly in the windows against the gathering dusk. "The McPherson place," Nathan said, relief evident in his voice. "We'll be safe here." They descended the ridge slowly, Thunder picking his way carefully down the steep path. As they approached the farmhouse, a dog began to bark, alerting the inhabitants to their arrival. The front door opened, and a burly man with a shock of white hair stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "Who goes there?" he called, his voice carrying across the yard. "It's Nate Blackwell, Frank," Nathan called back. "Bringing a friend." The rifle lowered immediately, and the man's stern expression broke into a broad smile. "Nate, you old son of a gun, Martha, come out here. Nate's come to visit." By the time they reached the yard, Frank McPherson had come down from the porch to greet them, and a plump woman with gray streaked hair had joined him, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good Lord, boy, you look like you've had some trouble," Frank observed as Nathan dismounted and helped Zara down from Thunder's back. Her legs nearly buckled as they touched the ground, stiff from the long ride and weak from the terror of their escape. "Ran into some road agents back in the pine woods," Nathan explained, keeping a supportive arm around Zara's waist. "This is Mrs. Zara Elliot. She's heading to her cousin's place in Willow Creek. Mrs. Elliot, Frank, and Martha McPherson." Martha bustled forward immediately, her motherly face creased with concern. "You poor dear, you look half dead on your feet. Frank, take care of Nate's horse. I'm getting this girl inside by the fire with some hot food in her belly." Before Zara could protest, she found herself whisked into the warm kitchen, seated at a well-worn table and presented with a bowl of fragrant stew and a thick slice of fresh bread. Martha continued to fuss around her, pouring coffee and asking gentle questions about her journey while Nathan and Frank cared for Thunder. "Widow, are you?" Martha asked perceptively, noticing Zara's black dress. "Yes, madam, just recently." Zara's voice wavered slightly. Martha's weathered hand covered hers briefly. "I'm sorry for your loss, child. The West takes more than its fair share of good men." She glanced toward the door. "Fortunate that Nate found you. He's a good man, though he'd be the last to admit it." "He's been very kind," Zara agreed, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks under Martha's knowing gaze. "Known him since he was just a gangling boy of 16, fresh off his first cattle drive," Martha said, refilling Zara's coffee cup. "Saved Frank's life during an Indian attack back in '67. He's welcome at our table anytime, and any friend of his is family to us." When Nathan and Frank finally came in from the barn, both men smelled strongly of horses and leather. Frank's booming laugh filled the kitchen as Nathan recounted their narrow escape from the road agents. "You always did have the devil's own luck, Nate," Frank chuckled. "Or maybe it was the angel riding with you this time." He winked at Zara, who couldn't help but smile despite her exhaustion. After supper, Martha showed Zara to a small but comfortable bedroom. "You get some rest now," the older woman said kindly. There's a wash basin and fresh water on the dresser, and I've laid out a nightgown. It might be a bit big, but it's clean." "Thank you, Mrs. McPherson. You're very kind to a stranger." Martha patted her shoulder. "Out here, no one stays a stranger for long. Besides, any woman who can ride double with Nate Blackwell for 2 days and still be standing has earned my respect." Left alone, Zara gratefully washed away the dust of the trail and changed into the borrowed nightgown. It was indeed too large, but the clean cotton felt heavenly against her skin after days in her travel-worn clothes. Through the thin walls, she could hear the murmur of voices from the kitchen, Frank's deep rumble, Martha's gentle tones, and Nathan's quieter responses. Despite her exhaustion, Zara found herself lingering by the door, straining to hear their conversation. She caught only fragments. Dangerous to be traveling alone. Willow Creek. That business with the Hargrove gang. The last bit made her frown in confusion. What business could Nathan have with a gang? Too tired to puzzle it out, Zara finally climbed into the narrow bed. The mattress was stuffed with fresh straw and covered with clean-smelling linens, a luxury after nights on the hard ground or in Nathan's small tent. She was asleep almost before her head touched the pillow. Morning came with the scent of coffee and bacon and the sounds of a household already busy with the day's work. Zara dressed quickly in her own clothes, which someone had brushed clean and hung by the stove overnight. When she entered the kitchen, she found Martha at the stove and Frank reading a newspaper at the table, but no sign of Nathan. "Good morning, dear," Martha greeted her cheerfully. "Sleep well, better than I have in weeks," Zara admitted. "Where is Mr. Blackwell?" "Nate's out checking on Thunder," Frank replied, folding his newspaper. "Wanted to make sure the horse was fit for the final leg of your journey. Sit down and have some breakfast." Zara had just finished her second cup of coffee when Nathan appeared at the kitchen door. He'd clearly taken the opportunity to clean up as well. His face was freshly shaved, his hair damp, and he wore a clean shirt that must have been borrowed from Frank, as it was slightly too large for his lean frame. "Morning," he said, nodding to Zara with a slight smile. "Thunder's rested and ready whenever you are. I've packed you both some food for the trail," Martha announced, producing a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Should be enough to see you to Willow Creek with some to spare." "That's very generous," Zara protested, but Martha waved away her objections. "Nonsense. Can't have you arriving at your cousin's door half-starved. What would she think of us?" The goodbyes were brief but warm, with Martha hugging Zara as if she were a long-lost daughter and Frank clapping Nathan on the shoulder with clear affection. As they rode away from the farmhouse, Zara felt a pang of regret at leaving the cozy haven so soon. "They're good people," she observed as the McPherson place disappeared behind them. "The best," Nathan agreed. "Saved my life more than once over the years." "Martha mentioned something about you saving Frank during an Indian attack." Nathan's shoulders tensed slightly. "That was a long time ago. Frank gives me more credit than I deserve." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythm of Thunder's gait familiar now to Zara. The day was clear and pleasantly warm, the trail easier than the previous day's journey. Nathan seemed preoccupied, his usual quiet attentiveness replaced by a distant thoughtfulness. "Is something troubling you?" Zara finally asked. Nathan hesitated, then sighed. "Just thinking about what awaits in Willow Creek. Your business there, something like that." He was silent for another moment before continuing. "Mrs. Elliot, Zara, there's something you should know before we reach town." The formality in his tone made her stomach clench with apprehension. "What is it?" "I wasn't entirely truthful about my reasons for going to Willow Creek." His voice was careful, measured. "I'm not just a cattle driver. I also work as a deputy marshal when I'm between drives." Zara twisted slightly to look at him, surprised. "A lawman." "Why would you keep that a secret?" "Because I'm heading to Willow Creek to arrest a man named James Hargrove. He and his gang have been terrorizing the territory for months, robberies, cattle rustling, even murder. We believe they're hiding out near Willow Creek." Understanding dawned on Zara. "The road agents yesterday." Might have been part of his gang, yes, or just ordinary bandits. Either way, I couldn't risk them knowing who I am." He paused. "I should have told you sooner. If you'd prefer to wait at the McPhersons until this business is settled—" "No," Zara interrupted firmly. "My cousin is in Willow Creek. If there's danger there, I need to know she's safe." Nathan's arm tightened around her waist briefly. "I understand, but once we reach town, you need to stay clear of me until this business is finished, for your own safety." The remainder of their journey was subdued, both lost in their own thoughts. The land grew more rugged as they approached Willow Creek, with rocky outcroppings and steeper hills. By mid-afternoon, they crested a ridge that offered their first view of the town, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a main street, with scattered homesteads and farms in the surrounding valley. "There it is," Nathan said. "Willow Creek." Zara felt a confusing mix of emotions: relief at reaching their destination, anxiety about what awaited her at Rebecca's boarding house, and an unexpected sadness that her journey with Nathan was coming to an end. "Which one is my cousin's boarding house?" she asked, scanning the town below. "The big white building at the north end of town," Nathan replied. "The Willow Creek boarding house. Well regarded from what I hear." They descended into the valley slowly, Thunder picking his way carefully down the steep trail. As they approached the outskirts of town, Nathan pulled up short. "From here we should separate," he said quietly. "I'll ride into town first, get a feel for the situation. You wait about half an hour, then follow. Anyone asks, you traveled alone. But please, Zara," his voice was urgent, "I don't want you caught in the crossfire if things go badly." She wanted to argue but saw the determination in his eyes. "Very well, half an hour." Nathan hesitated, then reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. If anything happens, give this to the sheriff. His name is Wilson, he'll know what to do." Zara took the paper with trembling fingers, suddenly afraid. "Nathan, I'll see you again," he promised, his gaze holding hers intensely. "When this is over." Before she could respond, he spurred Thunder forward, leaving her standing alone on the trail with his note clutched in her hand. She watched until horse and rider disappeared into town, then found a fallen log to sit on while she waited out the longest half-hour of her life. When she finally walked into Willow Creek, leading Thunder by the reins as Nathan had instructed, the town seemed unusually quiet. A few people hurried along the boardwalks, glancing nervously over their shoulders. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard men's voices raised in anger. Following Nathan's directions, she made her way to the north end of town. The Willow Creek boarding house was indeed impressive, a large two-story structure with a wide front porch and neat white paint. As she approached, the front door opened and a woman stepped out, shading her eyes against the sun. "Rebecca," Zara called hesitantly. The woman stared for a moment, then broke into a wide smile. "Zara, is that really you? Where's John?" The reunion was bittersweet. Rebecca embraced her warmly, then wept with her when Zara explained John's fate. They were still standing on the porch, Rebecca insisting on taking Thunder to the stable herself, when 3 gunshots shattered the quiet afternoon. "Get inside," Rebecca ordered, suddenly alert. "There's trouble in town." "What kind of trouble?" Zara asked, though she feared she knew the answer. "A marshal rode in earlier looking for the Hargrove gang," Rebecca explained, hurrying Zara into the boarding house. "Word is that some of them are holed up at the saloon." Zara's heart raced. This marshal, what did he look like? Tall, lean, dark hair, hazel eyes, riding a chestnut horse. Rebecca gave her a curious look. "Do you know him?" Before Zara could answer, more gunshots rang out, closer this time. Then came the thunder of hooves, and suddenly men were shouting in the street outside. "Get away from the windows," Rebecca warned, but Zara was already peering out, searching desperately for any sign of Nathan. What she saw made her blood run cold. 3 men on horseback were charging down the street, guns drawn. Behind them, another rider pursued Nathan, looking grim and determined. As she watched, one of the fleeing men twisted in his saddle and fired. The shot went wide, but Thunder stumbled, nearly throwing Nathan. Without thinking, Zara rushed out onto the porch. "Nathan!" she screamed. He looked up, momentarily distracted by her voice. In that split second, another of the outlaws turned and fired. Nathan jerked backward, then slumped forward over Thunder's neck. The horse, faithful to the end, continued the pursuit even as his rider lost consciousness. Zara was running before she realized what she was doing, Rebecca's shouts fading behind her. She reached the street just as Thunder, now riderless, circled back toward her. Nathan lay crumpled in the dust, blood spreading across his shirt. "No, no, no," Zara murmured, falling to her knees beside him. With shaking hands, she tore open his shirt to reveal a bullet wound just below his right shoulder. He was still breathing, but each breath was shallow and labored. Rebecca appeared beside her, her face pale but composed. "Let's get him inside," she ordered. "My late husband was a doctor. I know what to do." Together, they managed to half-carry, half-drag Nathan into the boarding house. Rebecca cleared the large dining table with one sweep of her arm, and they laid him upon it. While Rebecca gathered supplies, Zara held Nathan's hand, willing him to live. "Don't you dare die," she whispered fiercely. "Not when I've only just found you." The hours that followed were a blur of blood, pain, and fear. Rebecca worked with quiet efficiency, extracting the bullet, cleaning the wound, and stitching it closed. Zara assisted as best she could, following instructions numbly, her focus entirely on Nathan's pale face and the faint rise and fall of his chest. By nightfall, he had been moved to a bed in Rebecca's private quarters. The sheriff had come and gone, taking the note Nathan had given Zara and promising to send telegrams to the federal marshal's office. The Hargrove gang had escaped, but with posses forming in every town for miles around, their days were numbered. None of that mattered to Zara as she sat beside Nathan's bed, watching for any sign of improvement. Rebecca had assured her that the wound, while serious, wasn't likely fatal if infection could be prevented. Still, Zara couldn't shake the fear that had gripped her heart from the moment she saw him fall. "You should rest," Rebecca told her gently, bringing in a tray with tea and bread. "You've had quite an ordeal yourself." "I can't leave him," Zara replied, not taking her eyes from Nathan's face. Rebecca studied her for a moment, then nodded in understanding. "You care for him." It wasn't a question, but Zara answered anyway. "Yes, he saved my life. More than that, he made me feel alive again after John." Rebecca squeezed her shoulder. "Then stay. I'll check on you both in the morning." Left alone with Nathan, Zara finally allowed the tears she'd been holding back to fall. She wasn't sure when these feelings had developed, perhaps during those long hours on the trail, or maybe in the moment she'd seen him fall. All she knew was that the thought of losing him was unbearable. "I need you to wake up," she whispered, stroking his forehead gently. "There's so much I haven't told you." As if in response, Nathan's eyelids fluttered. He groaned softly, his head turning toward the sound of her voice. "Zara." His voice was weak, barely audible. "I'm here," she choked out, relief washing over her. "I'm right here." His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then finding her face. "You're crying." Zara laughed through her tears. "You were shot." "Did they get away?" he asked, trying to sit up and wincing at the pain. "Lie still," she ordered. "Yes, they escaped, but the sheriff has posses after them. Your job now is to heal." Nathan relaxed back against the pillows, his eyes never leaving her face. "You should be angry with me. I wasn't honest with you. You were trying to protect me." Zara took his hand, her fingers entwining with his. "Just as you've been doing since the moment we met." He was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "When I saw you sitting by that road," he finally said, "something told me my life was about to change. I've been alone for so long, Zara, never staying in one place, never letting anyone get close. And now?" She asked, hardly daring to hope. "Now I'm wondering if Willow Creek might need a retired marshal." His eyes held hers, the question clear in their hazel depths. "If there might be room in your new life for someone like me." Zara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "There's always been room," she whispered. "I just didn't know I was waiting for you to fill it." Their first kiss was gentle, mindful of his injury but filled with promise. When they finally broke apart, Nathan was smiling despite the pain. "I never thought sharing my bread with a widow beside the road would lead to this," he murmured. "Neither did I," Zara replied, matching his smile with her own, "but I'm grateful for every step of the journey." Outside, the sounds of the town continued, horses passing, voices calling, the ordinary rhythms of life in Willow Creek. But in that quiet room, a new journey was just beginning, one they would travel together. 6 months later, Nathan and Zara were married in a simple ceremony at the Willow Creek church. The Hargrove gang had been captured, Nathan's wounds had healed, and he had indeed retired from his duties as a marshal. With the skills he'd learned on the trail, he'd found work as Willow Creek's livery stable manager, while Zara helped Rebecca run the increasingly successful boarding house. On their wedding night, as they stood on the porch of the small house they'd purchased on the edge of town, Nathan pulled Zara close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "That day when I found you on the trail," Zara shook her head, leaning into his embrace. "How could I regret the day that saved my life? You saved mine too," he replied softly. "I just didn't know I needed saving." As the sun set over Willow Creek, painting the sky in brilliant hues of red and gold, Zara thought of the long journey that had brought her here, the grief, the fear, the hunger, and finally, the love that had given her a second chance at happiness. The road had been hard, but as Nathan's arms tightened around her, she knew she was finally home.